And just like that, we are back with chapter 45 of the universe according to Mugsy. I am Mugsy, the creator, and today we are talking current events, culture, and consciousness, as we always are. What day is it? Today is Thursday, September 12th, 2024. That's right. September 11th was yesterday. Oh, it almost slipped my damn mind. Me and this audience have a unique relationship that is ever evolving. You would not believe the lengths that I have had to go to just to bring this broadcast to you. Literally, you will not believe it. It will be something that, as I reflect on, I will laugh at years later because the world around us is truly unraveling. And this is going to be such a unique podcast, I believe, because we're really going to touch on a lot of the things we've touched on the first 44 chapters of this. And we're really going to dive into them and how they are playing out in our current events in our everyday life. Because in our consciousness, we did not pay enough attention that allowed it to get into our culture. And now we have to deal with the current events that we're faced with right now. But I was lucky enough last week to go up to Bar Harbor, Acadia National Park in Maine. Oh my God, I had no idea what I was in for in many respects. And I'm sure there are some of you watching this right now that have a context of who I am and what Bar Harbor is. I did not have any such context before I went up there. So that is a great way to start this off is let's catch up on what the hell I've been up to. What insights am I bringing back to you from my travels? And Bar Harbor's quite a unique place because it's very much like Salem, Massachusetts, which I've spent decades in the sense that it is a town that more or less is seasonal. While there are people that live there full time, it has a busy and a slow season. Um, Being up in Maine and with the national park, obviously that is the summertime, the warm season where people go out hiking. But what I was completely unaware of is how high a class, a community that is to summer in. Now, growing up in Boston on the North Shore, I am no new character to people that are rich coming up to some area around here for the summer. All right, presidents have done it like Barack Obama with his Martha's Vineyard estate, where I don't know, his chefs go naked swimming in pools and wind up dead. But the Cape and the Summer Baseball League, anybody that plays baseball, the Cape Cod Summer League is an example of this. Plenty of people come up to Beverly Farms and Manchester and Gloucester and Marblehead and Salem, spend some time here, and then they get the fuck out of here in the wintertime. So that is nothing new to me, but the amount of money with which they are playing with in Bar Harbor is quite different. I mean, you drive past a couple of private airports on the way in, if that's not a fucking dead giveaway. The other thing that was an absolute dead giveaway to me was the sparing Harris Waltz signs. So you know that blue collar is not something that is very prevalent up there, or at least maybe not publicly, because the people you work for wouldn't like your political opinions, and you're definitely working for somebody if you're blue collar up there. But there's a nice little town with a ton of restaurants, some expensive ones, some less expensive ones. They got a little movie theater. It's all right on the water in this beautiful rocky Maine coastline. Acadia National Park, for those of you that have never heard of it, is something all the national parks you should check out. I don't know why in the fuck, our government is screwing everything up, but they're protecting that land. But that land's protected for a reason, and you should go to see it, if not for any other reason than to see what life was like for all humankind prior to the last maybe 150 years. That's what our ancestors, just one or two people ago, lived like. It's only us crazy people that turned on the lights somewhere around the early 20th century that have lived in this particular wave of society that may only exist for a short time. Who knows where it's going to go in the future? Maybe we will return to our forefathers like they lived in the times of the past, which looks a bit like Acadia, Yellowstone, and the national parks across this beautiful country. So me and the wife went up there, and just the duality of everything going on. Me having no money in my bank account, more or less, but the cash in my wallet, which is more than I thought I would be going to Bar Harbor with, thankfully, because hey, times are good right now, right? But at the same time, we are by far, far and away the poorest people staying in this beautiful, sweet hotel room that overlooks the fucking water from my wife's birthday. We see the Gulf of Maine and this beautiful little island that you can walk out to at low tide. It is gorgeous every single time I look. I take a picture and I'm like, there's a postcard. Oh, there's a postcard. There's a postcard. It makes complete and total sense. You are living at some elevation because there's so many mountains right on that coastline. That is good for your health. So from that perspective, it was awesome. The duality of the people working in the industry as I work in the industry in Salem. Um, they're all transplants, none from this country. The amount of businesses that were using all cash under the table, clearly owned by large corporate interests, was interesting. We stayed at the Opal Resort Hotel, like it's a hotel portfolio. And in looking at the other hotels on the island there, downtown, they're all a part of the same network. So I wouldn't be surprised if many of the same interests own a lot of the restaurants as well as they developed that land. Um, and the disdain with which the industry, restaurant industry, had for the clientele coming in and out of the businesses there was next level. It was, they hated you. They didn't mind you knowing it. They would appreciate it if you bought your shit and left. No drinks, no food, no ice cream, no pets inside the store. Come in, pay, and leave. We do not want you. We don't need you. Thanks, but no thanks. We don't take your credit card. We don't take Apple Pay. We don't take fucking Venmo. It's cash or nothing. We're not reporting any of this to the IRS. And it was, I don't know. The maybe Bar Harbor's been around for a little bit longer than Salem. Salem has for sure grown in the last decade to 15 years. So the welcomeness with which the city receives its monetary clientele base is with a much more positive vibe than the working class in Bar Harbor, which it seems like they cannot wait to get back on their plane to wherever they came from, because none of them are from the United States of America. Or if they are citizens, which they might be, they don't live there full time and they do not speak the language and they have no interest in learning it. And we're going to come back to that later. Culture and different cultures and how they may clash as they are mixed together. But yes, the community there, oh, it was so interesting. And we were lucky enough, let's talk about the mountain first. The national park, just gorgeous. Just for any of you that are on the East Coast, New England, or you want to fly in to do it, honestly, it is worth it. Cadillac Mountain, there's a sunrise where you have to get tickets to drive up in your car to about 2,000 feet elevation. You watch the sunrise on the easternmost point of the eastern seaboard in the United States. It is absolutely breathtakingly gorgeous. From what I hear, because although we were able to book tickets and drive our car up that hill at 5 o'clock in the morning to see that beautiful sunrise, we only got a tiny peek at it coming down the mountain because it was full clouds, didn't see anything. And as we're driving down the face of the mountain, there's a break in the clouds right as there's this little pull off in the road. I will try and put the picture in on this podcast for those of you viewing it. It was so gorgeous and so breathtaking that you feel connected to this earth in a way that you didn't know was possible. It's like achieving a level of peace that you could only dream about. And I'm not joking at all. That is underselling it. It is well worth whatever the price was. I didn't even pay for it. Thanks, wifey. um, and there are some trails. We did the Jordan Pond Trail, which is this beautiful, the drinking water for the town of Bar Harbor comes from Jordan Pond. Who knows where that water comes from, but it is so crystal clear that you can't put your feet in it. Don't mind the boats that they're using in there. Those carry humans, and humans are more important. I didn't make that up. I read that on the sign. That was their justification. That's how you know this is such a high class community. The signs that they put up don't even make sense. We are driving a boat in here. This boat is for humans. Don't stick your feet in this water because your human feet are dirtier than the boat that are carrying the important humans. Don't worry about them. I don't understand how you could even put that on a sign. But besides that, they lay these boards around the pond in areas that it's too rocky. And there's a little bit of rock hill climbs. And it's just around this gorgeous pond in the thick Maine brush. The parking there is tough to get, so I would recommend going early. But if you drive around enough, you'll find a spot in the parking lot. And what I was taken aback with, because I spent so much time in the woods at Breakheart Reservation and Middlesex Fells Reservation and Lynn Woods, was this is not New England woods. This is the main backwoods brush where you cannot see, as you're walking around that pond, 5 or 10 feet into the woods. That's how thick the underbrush is. And that is crazy because you see all these signs about the wildlife you might see, but I don't know how you would see the wildlife because the brush is so thick. There are, I don't know how many dozen trails. There's a bunch of cool sites to take pictures of: lighthouses, Thunder Point, where the water as it comes in makes this thundering noise as it hits against the rocks. And like I said, every single spot that you pick is this gorgeous, gorgeous view of the coast. There are a couple trails that we didn't do called like Beehive, where you climb open rock faces where you're on cliffs. Those sounded awesome. They're short 200-foot elevation or 200-foot hikes. And they are just really cool. We didn't have time for all that. But while we were out at the restaurants, I think this perfectly encapsulates kind of the duality of Bar Harbor. Is you have these restaurants and these little ice cream stands that are cash only, and you could get a burger for $10 and they treat you like shit. And there are some high-end restaurants like this Italian joint that we went out to. And the casual conversation overheard was unlike anything I have heard in some decades since I have been spending time around people in um among real wealthy communities, people that trace their roots back to the Mayflower and the boats that came over to this country in its founding eras, people that go to the boarding schools and have such vast family wealths that they need to tap their children to manage family members at a very young age. They need to start grooming their children to understand the way in which the world actually works, not the presentation that is sold to others, so that the family may handle its business without getting in the way. And that takes some cultivation of a young mind in order to raise them to the development in maturity necessary to do the things required of them to carry out the family needs. And how in the hell did I gain so much insight over one casual dinner, you may ask? And there was a young gentleman sitting with an older woman, appeared to be of a grandmother's age, maybe a great aunt. And I only heard bits and pieces of the conversation this 17 or 18-year-old young man was having with this older woman. Now, I gather that he was 17 or 18 because the conversation they were having was about October 15th being Parents' Weekend. And he would like to invite her down, and he would love to also see her at his graduation in the spring. Now, I imagine the pleasantries that they were having over appetizers were because as the entrees were being served, so was the main course and the main event, which happened to be some family agreement that traces back to the 1970s, of which a man so young could not hope to have full understanding of the agreements and promises that were made at that time from his family members to this older woman. Regardless of those promises, the way that his parents and his family feel is they have met all of their financial obligations, and there is no need to continue any more financial entanglement between the family and this woman. That does not take away from the fact on how close they feel that their relationship is, which is why they'd like to include her in all of the family gatherings, which are mid-October family weekend and graduation. He was literally taking messages from someone on the phone and directing the rest of this woman's financial future at the same time over a chicken parmesan. It was fascinating to watch. I can only imagine the school and the prep school, the boarding school, and all of the grooming and time that it took to develop such a young man to be able to speak so articulately while at the same time taking away some lifestyle that this woman has felt entitled to from sometime in the early 70s, according to the feelings of his family. That is something that you don't get everywhere. These are not the same conversations you're having at the Olive Garden or Chuck E. Cheese, or certainly not the Village Tavern in Salem before you go on a witch tour. This is the upper crust of society. These are the people that make the decisions that control the experiences that you get to have way on the other side of this. These are undoubtedly the justices that determine the laws and punishment that you must live under. This is undoubtedly the CEOs of corporations that dictate the products that are available on the shelves that you shop in. These are the people that make the decisions that affect your lives. And if you're paying attention, you can gain some incredible insights into how the world works, because there is no doubt in my mind the way that my parents raised me was different than the way that this young man was raised. Which way is a better way to be raised? It remains to be seen, right? Who knows where this young man is going to end up and what he's going to achieve? I do know he is going to be playing sports at Tufts next year, maybe golf, tennis, something like that. He's not on the football team. I can't remember which it was. It was something like that. Maybe it was Tufts. Maybe it was another NESCAC school. I do remember that it wasn't an wasn't an Ivy League. And I found that curious. Maybe he's not the brightest bulb in the bunch, or maybe his family isn't as connected as one might assume from the content of the conversation they were having over hors d'oeuvres. Oh man, what a week it's been. What a week. What a couple weeks. And it's all unraveling right in front of our eyes. And I know that the content going on at the tables that you may be eating next to is not anything like that, because when I got back, I was having dinner in Danvers. Oh, on my way back, we stopped at the Berry Tavern, and I was listening to people talk about their boats and how big they are and how much property they own and how little time they have to spend on it. And oh, they are so proud of how much they've attained because they have so much stuff. They just have so much stuff. And it's just, those people look at me with the same disdain, and it's just so interesting. You know, no matter where I'm at, whether I'm in Bar Harbor trying to get an ice cream cone, people are looking at me like I don't belong. And then you come back to Danvers and you try and get a cheeseburger at the Berry Tavern, and everybody's talking about you. And if you can't keep up with them, they don't want to hear a goddamn thing you have to say. And oh, would you be so surprised I don't belong there? And here I am, trying to fight so hard to have this conversation and bring these insights to you. And people are fighting me to even have the time to do this, because nobody gives a shit. This audience can't appreciate me yet, but you will. You will over time. And that is where I got this alpaca hat. Bahaba. Oh, oh, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous natural fiber. Oh, what a trip. Now, what else? What did I miss? What has been going on here? There's so much to clean up. The world is really unraveling. I would like to touch on a couple current event stories that have gone on over the past week, because they involve a couple of friends of mine, one of which I've talked about quite extensively, one of which I've talked about a little less, and one guy I don't know at all, but it's a story that I'm quite sure a lot of the population has heard about in this country. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Tim Pool and the collection of conservative media, political analysts that cover current events and journalism, and how they were duped by Lauren Chen receiving money from RT, a Russian news outlet. That's a lot of information. Who are these people? Lauren Chen's an independent journalist who apparently was receiving money to make videos from RT Russian Times. That has been banned in the United States since around the time of the Ukraine-Russian conflict began kicking off. That is a publication whose censorship is curious in and of the first place in a country that has free speech. Journalists as prominent as Chris Hedges, who received a Pulitzer Prize for work that actually meant something to journalism at the time he received that prize. I don't know whether he was working at that outlet at the time. I believe he was relegated to that outlet after his success because of the uncovering of what his story, which he won the Pulitzer, revealed about our country and our government. Now, while it remains to be seen what goes on with this Lauren Chen, whether she is a noble actor or someone acting maliciously with intention to deceive the American populace, whether that's discovered later or not, at this current time, what is very obvious is there is a case being built against conservative media pundits, analysts, or people covering current events in this media, news, and election cycle. This is something I have seen time and time again, because this particular story is not of great importance. Tim Pool and his media company worked with this particular person on a sparing basis. It is, while she may have appeared on his Timcast in IRL show, they are completely separate entities. And that is an opinion-based show where they discuss news events of the day. Now, Tim Pool and his credibility is the reason that I wanted to cover this. Tim Pool's a friend of mine. He has taught me things. He has taught me many lessons about our current events and our culture. He had the bravery to produce and create Timcast IRL at a time where free speech was under attack. He was one of few people who stood up and disseminated information that was later regarded to be truthful, and he was one of the only people at the time welcoming on people from both sides of the political aisle to have a discussion for the greater common good of the American electorate. He is one of the reasons that I decided to do this podcast and this show. So when he is under attack, I feel it necessary to explain my own insights as I see the game and reality as it's being played out. It is rather appropriate that last week we had Dave Portnoy Appreciation Day. Because while I am so thankful for Dave Portnoy for all the lessons that he taught me, one of the things he continually showed me time and time again is how smear campaigns work, how the media starts to build evidence through outlets based on information that is at best gray at the time, where we do not have a clear indication of how much wrongdoing has gone on. But despite that, the media outlets are writing as if there has already been a judge, jury, and executioner, and this is all played out in a court of law. Now, the way that this is going to work is there will be a couple stories like this over the coming weeks. And as the election gets closer, these stories will begin to build up. And whenever you start to search for these people's names, all you will find is negative content about them. This is ephemeral information. Ephemeral information is data where when you go out to search for something, you see other information that has an effect on you without your conscious knowledge. That is the game that is beginning to be developed with people like Benny Johnson and Tim Pool. While I may not share the same political affinity as any of these conservative pundits, I very much feel that we are similar in so many ways because of our intention and what we desire to do with our energy. Now, their focus on politics in the political realm is very important work that I appreciate them doing so that I don't have to. Even this has been such a struggle. It is so clear that I didn't do it for any pat on the back. It's clearly something that I am compelled to do with some burning desire inside of me that I recognize in the work that they do as well. So as this campaign begins to kick off against them, allow me to do the documentation and explain it to you as such, so that in the coming months, everyone understands exactly how the game is being played. And they have all of the information necessary to make the decisions that affect their own consciousness, which helps create our collective culture so that in the future we may have current events that are playing out a little differently than they are in the news cycle today. That was a lot. So much already. Now let's talk about another friend of mine, closed-minded Joe Rogan. Oh, as closed as his mind is, I love him so much. I have said this, over the past weeks, especially working these jobs and integrating into this community that is the Salem October community and still developing this podcast. My time has been under a crunch and I've had to use it exponentially more efficiently. And as I am doing such, I am unable to continue to keep such a close eye on the wire. That's what I call paying attention to all of the relevant conversations and informations that is coming out that would indicate the direction that the future is going in. That is understanding the present in real time. And if I am unable to listen to all of the amazing discussions that are going on, a lot of which Joe Rogan are having, then I'm not going to be as plugged in, and I'm going to have to develop my intuition on which conversations are going to be the most important moving forward. And again, coming back to the fact that myself and Tim Dillon have been covering, the same stories on his weekly podcast, I find some solace in the fact that there are people looking at the puzzle and seeing it in the same way that I do. So I feel like, that combined with the fact that I've basically been able to predict the future for the last few years now, coming up on half a decade, maybe more than that, I feel pretty comfortable in the position that we're in. And I am dumbfounded as our ability not to find an audience. But I'm quite comfortable with the content that we are producing here. Now, getting back to Joe Rogan and Darryl Cooper and the MartyrMade podcast, I haven't even gotten a chance to listen to Joe Rogan or Darryl Cooper's MartyrMade podcast, but I did get a chance to listen to Darryl Cooper's opening and his response to the Blob. I am so happy to be continually surprised at what is evolving out of the woodwork that we can call the last 4 years and the great awakening that has gone on since 2020 and all that year entailed. I don't know where exactly Darryl Cooper came from, but his 6 hour long podcast on specific events in our history, and the microscope and lens with which he dissects the narratives of the past sounds like something I am very excited to sink my teeth into. I would love to hear from anybody that's listened to it and has a opinion on some episodes that might be good ones to start with. I recognized almost immediately from the conversation that he was having in his response to the blob, and the blob being the media and the, again, portrayal of an individual seemingly well-intentioned, seemingly trying to develop a diverse opinion on an event that took place in our history, where there seems to be a narrative that has been run with, and take a look at it under a microscope, because perhaps there are insights that no one has been able to notice due to the fact that we've always accepted the narrative as it existed. Now, he decided to do this with World War II. One thing that we have talked about continually, time and time again, is the fact that there seems to be a worldwide agreement that Hitler was the bad guy in World War II and the good guys won. And wherever there is unity of opinion, there is often at the heart of it a lie. Because nature doesn't usually work that clean and neat. Oh, and if you've been paying attention to the effects, the things that happened after that war, it would seem that that indicated a change in the way that life went on. What else did that coincide with? I would love to listen to Darryl Cooper's opinion, but again, I don't have enough time to do so. So that is why I appreciate my friend close-minded Joe Rogan so much, because he really is connected to the heartbeat, the pulse, because he has cultivated such a network of friends and people that keep him abreast of the interesting ongoings of our culture and our society. Dr. Robert Epstein was a podcast I did take the chance to listen to yesterday, and Dr. Robert Epstein had a breakdown, if you want to call it that, in his first hour of the podcast, because this man is doing what everyone else in this country is afraid to do, with good reason. He is pointing a video camera, more or less, at the largest tech company, Google, which manufactures opinion in this country. And he is documenting it so that the American people have a fighting chance at litigating against Google. And he has such conclusive evidence, not only that our elections have been stolen from us going back to 2012, the type of evidence that he is now uncovering is so dark and frightening that it must be disinfected with the light if we have any hope of moving forward with a better society for the people existing in it. Because what we are discovering is opinion is much more malleable than most people understand. Your mind can be changed so easily by this ephemeral information, which are things like the autofill inside Google, as you start to ask a question, it autofills the rest of the question that will dictate your opinion on the subject with which you were searching, seemingly without your knowledge. As AI starts to incorporate more and more that little summary box that you get when you Google anything, anyways, trending searches. And then on top of all of that, most people don't understand that when you go out to Google, it is not a search engine in the fact that it is providing relevant information to the term with which you searched. It is providing for you curated information based on Google's opinion on what it thinks is best for you and their ad business. And now what we are finding out is also what Google wants you to think, which is a button, a thumb on the scale that we didn't know existed until Dr. Robert Epstein pointed his recording device at Google with the help of American citizens like you and I, giving Dr. Robert Epstein access to your private data, which you have already granted access to all of these giant tech corporations for free to do so anyways and manipulate your mind. Now, why is this not such a good idea? Why do people like Jimmy Dore not even want Dr. Robert Epstein's phone number in his phone? It's because people around him keep winding up dead under curious circumstances. Makes no sense. Makes no sense that his wife's new car decided to speed into oncoming traffic, seemingly with no brakes, absolutely kill her in a violent, horrifying death. Then, not only was there no investigation into this, all of the evidence was sent to a recycling plant in Mexico before any investigation could be done, despite the protest of a grieving, widowed husband. Now that, if it's not scarier enough, was something that he had been warned about by congressmen after testifying in Congress. So our sitting congressman, after he provided testimony on what Google is actually doing, then warned him about the fact that we don't think you're going to be alive. I got a bad feeling about you, buddy. I don't think you're going to be alive for very long. Shortly after that, well, his wife gets in this horrific crash. Now, I don't want to dive too much into the horrific nature of everything that Dr. Epstein has had to absorb. If you would like to investigate that, he goes into it on the Joe Rogan Experience in his most recent episode. But seemingly you should be frightened enough. If not for yourself, then for your children. And if you have no children, then for the future children you may one day wish to have. There is someone out there doing it for us. He is carrying the load with which many of us are too afraid to bear. But there's only so much he can do to disseminate his information. And again, I come back to close-minded Joe Rogan, and I thank him, my friend, my best friend, for that. What a horrifically scary thing as we are on the precipice of AI. And as we are on the precipice of AI, we are recognizing that we are already deep in the middle of it because algorithms are just patterns. Patterns are AI. We are the AI of the current day until machines replace us. But what is our body if it is not just a machine? Oh, that we are in control over. That we have control over. How do we have control over it? Our consciousness. Jesus Christ, it just keeps coming back together time and time again. Current events, culture, consciousness, in and out. What else happened in the news this week? The country's falling apart. Now, this guy's not a friend of mine particularly, but I would love to be friends with Tyreek if he would have me. I don't know if I can catch up to him. That's one speedy motherfucker. Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins was handcuffed and I think arrested, definitely detained before his most recent opening day kickoff Sunday of the NFL season in Miami, Florida. And that is crazy. What is going on? Now, if you have not watched the body cam footage, I am not saying that Tyreek Hill did himself any favors. No, of course not. That does not excuse the fact that our military industrial complex and security state that we exist in, which is enforced on the lowest levels by our local law enforcement, who we had a war on for the past 4 years for defunding the police, which rooted out many of the best of the blue that we had on the lowest levels of this country. What we have left is seemingly potentially the best and worst of what's left. We have the nicest people that didn't quit, that didn't give up, that are still fighting to maintain some level of law and order in this country. And we have the worst people that just want control and power. The weakest men among us that think that control is ripping somebody out of a car and tossing them around and handcuffing them. When at the same time, there is seemingly tens of millions of undocumented workers, undocumented migrants, criminals who came here illegally, being assisted by our government, taking over Targets and apartment buildings and malls in Aurora, Colorado, and ripping off ducks' heads in Springfield, Ohio. There's an epidemic of people stealing Kias in 10 seconds with nothing but a cell phone and going for joyrides all over this country. There are people doing illegal drugs and living illegally out on the street in encampments. There's illegal businesses going on, cash businesses. We live in a mafia state that is enforced by this military industrial complex. And now we are ripping celebrities on their way to entertainment events out of their car. Sure. For being an asshole, definitely. But there is no more regard for upholding your duty as an officer to have any responsibility and integrity for the way with which you conduct yourself. Everyone is a criminal. And you don't know what you're protecting other than yourself, because the police now live in a state of fear. That is the consciousness with which they exist in. And it's, how could they not? But they are exerting their control over people in such ways, continually documented on camera, when they don't delete the footage themselves because they are so corrupt, that we can no longer uphold this idea that you are working for anybody other than yourself. And when I say society is starting to unravel, can you not see that? The undocumented criminals in this country is beginning to become a problem because cultures are very different. That's why they develop so far apart. where America was the cultural melting pot at the end of the 19th and beginning of 20th centuries. That was a time when everyone wanted to embrace this common culture and create one that was this American ideal towards the American dream, which was reformed by FDR in his extended terms in office, where there was a full integration of this socialist state. And that was what everybody came together to create. We can, I don't know how we could argue about that. But now what we have is a country which at one point had its unique culture and vision on things that it agreed upon, things that it would fight for and uphold to protect. And we have failed to provide the scrutiny with which freedom requires to maintain that level of culture in these here states that were united once. And now we have a microcosm of different cultures that have only been further inflamed by the importation of other cultures into the most impoverished communities that we already have in America. Now, it's hard for most people to understand unless they've traveled to other countries and other cultures that are drastically different from the United States, what it's like to exist in a society that doesn't agree with your values. If you've ever traveled to the Middle East and seen the way that women walk around public society, it's easy to observe that there's something different here. How come men have freedom to wear certain clothing, but women are covered up in ways that in the West we would consider backwards? There's nothing you can do as a solitary single person to change the culture moving into the Middle East. Now, what we have done is imported people from all different cultures all around the world to this country, and we've upheld them in our most impoverished communities through government support by money that we printed and is coming from the taxpayers, further eroding the value of their dollars, making their lives more difficult. On top of the fact, they now have to cope with the fact that they are trying to raise children in a culture that they believe they are entitled to, while there are other cultures now at an arm's distance, if that are counterintuitive to the way that they were raised. Now, a lot of people don't know that voodoo is very popular among the Haitian community. And as we have imported more illegal criminal people into this country, some of them are Haitian. I'm not saying that some of these people aren't well-intentioned and good people. I'm not saying that they're criminal in nature other than the fact that they came here illegally, breaking our laws to come here, and now they are practicing their customs, their religions, their culture here in this country, and it is frightening to many around us. Now, voodoo being such a large part of the Haitian culture is frightening to many people in the United States of America. And to practice this voodoo, they use blood from animals, wherever they can find them. To rip this culture from these people, they will die before they allow you to do so. So they will do whatever they have to find a cat to kill, to get the blood necessary to practice their voodoo, which is a spiritual religion-esque type practice. Now, what the hell are we going to do with that here in the United States? Because people that are taking their kids to ballet don't want to worry about coming home to their home and having the family pet strung up in the street for some cultural practice that is foreign to their understanding because they have never been raised to have to be accepting of these foreign cultures, right? Everyone thinks they're so accepting until they're faced with something they've never seen before. When I say this culture is eroding, it's because there's such a clash on every level. And there's such a war going on the lowest among us, which used to be a small percentage of this country. But as the middle class has eroded and our economic base is now grown to 40 or 50% of our gross domestic product now comes from government spending, when our economy is based on the fact that our government is inefficient, we can no longer sustain ourselves. We just can't. We certainly can't sustain the military-industrial complex. We can't sustain the war on agriculture and energy that private business and our government is colluding to exert upon its citizens. We cannot fight every war on every front at the same time. We're overextended. Now, what's the answer to all this? You got to take back your consciousness. You only have power over you. Stop feeding into this. How are you feeding into this? How are you creating the space, the environment necessary for me to sit here and just try and help you look at it? Oh, even while I do this podcast, my feet are grounded on this earth because there's nothing more powerful than being grounded. All right? That's what my cultural beliefs and values are. That's what my morals and ethics provide, this framework, a philosophy for me to move about the world and tackle my everyday with. It is what provides me the ability to be so flexible in the environment as I move around the world, is because I am so rigid in my own understanding of myself. That's how I can explore these topics and not allow them to fully engulf my complete and total existence. It's how I can go into a restaurant like the Village Tavern and run around and get soda pop for you people as a servant. And I can seemingly be having more fun than you had any day of work you've ever had in your entire life. I love everything that I do, including explain this to other people, because we all need to wake up, and we all are starting to. That's why I'm so happy to understand that there's going to be days now that I am not plugged into the network. I'm not plugged into the grid. I'm not riding the wires, that my audience brings information to me, stories that I haven't seen yet, because of the literal limitations of my time and energy. If I'm spending so much time explaining things, there's going to be things that I'm no longer exposed to. And for that, my audience, the audience that I'm cultivating now, is going to inform me. And damn it, if this platform gets big enough, maybe we're going to be able to have some conversations with some really interesting people, because you may not be able to talk to them. Shit, maybe I can. Definitely not now. Definitely not at this moment. But what we're doing here is important. Why? I don't know yet. I haven't exactly figured that out, but as I start to follow my intuition, it is revealed to me over time that everything I have done is for a reason, seemingly some reason that is bigger than myself. I am grateful for every decision. Every seeming mistake that I made was a lesson learned so that I could learn how to break these patterns and create new patterns that work better for me. And maybe I can put them on display for people like you, which is what my friends like Joe Rogan and Tim Pool and Jimmy Dore and Matthias DeStefano did for me. If you find somebody in your life that is doing something similar to what I am doing for you, then I encourage you to follow that person wholeheartedly. Just make sure that they are being honest and authentic. And if I am nothing, I feel like at least I'm that. At least I seem like I'm not trying to pull the wool over your eyes like everyone else in this society is trying to do. I'm trying to teach you about the potholes that I've already stepped in so that you don't have to step in the same ones, so that we can build some sort of path towards this future that's coming, whether we like it or not, that will make our current events, our now, our moments, our everyday that much more enjoyable. We should be sucking as much love and happiness out of every experience we have as much as we can. That's the difference when I go into that restaurant. That's the difference when I'm listening to a podcast. That's the difference when I'm sitting here trying to come up with something to talk to you guys about. All right? But none of that does me any good until you guys decide for yourself to take back your consciousness. And I know we didn't get into the debate, which I didn't watch one moment of. I just can't get sucked into this political cycle because I already see the game that's being played. Have you not caught on to that yet? So there's going to be some stories that we're not even going to touch on. And they might be big to everybody else. But the stories that I cover are going to be important, and it's going to be revealed over time just how important these stories are. And again, the only way that starts is taking back your consciousness. I love you. I'm out.